Hi everyone, it's Dr. Julie Granger here with PRISM Wellness Center, and today it is Dr. Julie's book club. I'm sitting outside on my beautiful porch in the beautiful Atlanta, Georgia weather. I couldn't resist filming this outside today just because it's so nice, and I hope you all are getting some time to enjoy the spring weather as well. This month, April, with PRISM is Female Athlete Health Month. And every day on social media, I've been posting something about female athlete health or young female athletes. This week in particular, I'm talking about a lot about just general female athlete information. And if you've watched any of my other videos or you have followed me at all, you probably know that my real passion is in pelvic health and also in young female athletes. So today for book club, we will be talking about this awesome book, Below Your Belt, which is by Missy, Lavender and Jeni and it's such an amazing book. I was on the mailing list when they were first doing I can't remember exactly what it was, but like a crowdfunding to begin their Below Your Belt campaign, and now it's become a really nice online campaign and resource for girls, and it's exactly what I would want in a book for girls. So it's a chapter book that details all kinds of things, and I'm going to get into all of the details in a little bit, but it really all centers around pelvic and abdominal health in girls, and it's written for girls, so it's in their language, in ways they'll understand, ways that are cool. So before I get into the book, I want to introduce the topic of pelvic health in girls and why it's such a passion of mine. So I am not only a sports physical therapist specializing in girls and young athletes, boys as well, but I also am a pelvic health physical therapist, specializing in pelvic health of all females and males as well, but more females than males. And I got into my interest in pelvic health, which was really more women's health, so grown women, or at least adult women, and realized that there was a nice crossover with pelvic health and my other passion, which was young female athletes. It took me a while to reconcile those things, but after several years of studying and reading, I figured out how I could reconcile them, and how, pelvic health is actually the most important to talk about in kids, and that's really what this book club is about today. And I love that Below Your Belt has come out as one resource to offer, and I'm hoping to contribute to the resources for kids and for parents of kids as well. So I have my note sheet here so that I can stay on task. I really think that the pelvic floor matters the most for girls, in young girls and in young girl athletes, and we have such an opportunity as parents, as coaches, as providers, and as athletes themselves who are watching and listening to really steer the ship in the right direction for them. So I'd like to start out by talking a little bit about what the pelvic floor is and what its job is. So it plays a lot of roles, and it's located here. I'm going to use their picture from this book because I really like this picture. In between the pelvic bones, there are muscles here called the pelvic floor. At the top and in the front of the pelvic bones are the abdominal muscles. Behind are the spinal muscles, and in this book they call them the pyramid muscles. They sort of form a pyramid, and it's the base of the whole person's torso. And at the top, what's not pictured here is the diaphragm. So the diaphragm makes the fourth major core muscle. We can look at it in a pelvic model too. So I love 3D, I love models, they're very fun. This is the pelvis. If you're looking at the pelvis from the front, this is the pelvis here. If we flip the pelvis, if someone were to be lying on their back and you were looking at them from below, these are the pelvic floor muscles, and there's several layers of muscles. So the most close to you layer would be the what's called the urogenital triangle, and these are the muscles that really control urination, but also create like a sphincter on the urethra here in females and the vagina in females as well. So they don't actually come off in real people, but in my model they're magnetic, so they can come off if they'll actually let me. There we go. Underneath we have another layer of muscles. There's a second layer of muscles that are a little bit more membranous, or not quite as muscly, and then a third layer here called the levator ani muscles here. So those also form sphincters around this, being the vaginal vault here, the urethra, and then the rectum here. all of the pelvic floor muscles form a supportive role. So I already mentioned they're part of the core. They're just as an important part of the core as the abdominal muscles. We all might think of the abs or the spinal muscles as part of the core, but the pelvic floor is just as important. In fact, its job is to hold all of the organs in. So in this model, I have a model of the rectum, the uterus, and the ovaries, and the bladder, given that it's a female model. And the pelvic floor's job is to keep these, along with all the other stomach and guts and all the other muscles, inside the pelvis. So they form a supportive role, and as muscles in the core, they help keep pressure balanced in all of these pyramid muscles, or what we also call canister muscles, up top. So they work in conjunction with the abdominals, which would be right here where my hand is, right in front of the pelvis. The spinal muscle is back here, and then the diaphragm would live over the top. We call them the canister because it does form kind of a canister. It's more of a flexible canister that can move along with the person. The muscles contract and relax along when the person moves. The core muscles play a really important role in controlling posture and regulating posture, even when you're not aware of it. So you may not know that the pelvic floor muscles do have a role in making sure that you have good posture. And I say good posture knowing that there's really no such thing as good posture, but they do help you maintain the right posture at the right time for the activity that you're doing. And lastly, they do have sexual and reproductive function. So in people who are old enough and interested in having babies and reproducing, or old enough to have sexual intercourse or sexual activity and intimacy, the pelvic floor muscles do have a role in that as well. And there can be problems with all of those activities related to the pelvic floor muscles and related to all of the other muscles in the core, and how they're working with the pelvic floor as well. So that's our quick anatomy intro. There's so much more we could say about that, and I will in future videos, but just so you know, that's the basis of the pelvic floor muscles in anyone, not just girls, but they're very, very important. And in athletes, I mentioned how the pelvic floor muscles have a job, along with all the other core muscles, in making sure you have the right posture at the right time for the activity you're doing. Well, posture is super important when it comes to sports, and it's really important to make sure that people stay balanced in their posture, in their torsos, so that they don't end up with injuries in other places. Sometimes we don't have the right balance or the right use of the core and the torso muscles, and we end up with injuries in our shoulders or in our knees or in maybe our ankles or something because of it. And that is really, really common in female athletes. Now, the reason why it's super important, and probably most important to young female athletes, is because they're actually developing the use of these muscles, and they're actually growing their torsos and growing their legs and growing their arms from the time they're born all the way up into adulthood, when they stop growing and stop developing. So those of us who work in pediatrics, we love working with kids because all of us, probably, I guess we all love it. I guess I'm speaking for all of us as a group. But for me, it's so exciting because we're working right alongside a developmental process going on. You can really see it happening from day to day, and really helping someone develop their postural health, their pelvic health, their abdominal health, and their sports-specific muscle coordination is so exciting to me. It's just so much fun to see it change and to play a role in the muscle function and what we call physical literacy that's going to live with them for the rest of their lives. If something goes wrong in childhood or something goes wrong in adolescence, we do have a great opportunity to intervene and help repave the way of patterns and coordination and things that might actually not be optimal for moving into adulthood. So we do have a great opportunity to change things. And lastly, if something never goes right in childhood or adolescence, a lot of times it can lead to problems in adulthood. So it's a really nice time in pediatrics and adolescents to really pay attention to what's going on in the pediatric body, in the young female athlete's body, to make sure that she becomes a really healthy adult female, and she can stay active as an adult throughout her life. So pelvic health in the young female athlete really starts from the moment that a young girl is born. And at that time, her pelvic development, her pelvic floor development really starts the moment she starts pooping, peeing, laughing, crying, and breathing. So obviously we want our babies to breathe. Obviously we want them to do these things. And moms and dads out there who are, you know, at their wits' end at the baby who keeps crying, just know that maybe think about it that she's developing her pelvic floor muscles. And it's going to help her out later in life. It's also contributing to her continence and her ability to potty train. So the pelvic floor muscles, as I said, do serve as sphincters. So her ability to take deep breaths, to take big gasps, to cry, to laugh, to squeal, to use her abdominal muscles really do help with her potty training later in life. As she starts to move, so she develops the ability to lift her head, the ability to roll from front to back and back to front, to sit up on her own, develop more upright postures and things like that. That's where all four of those core muscles start to play a role in development of the pelvic floor muscles. After that, she's probably going to toddle around a little bit and start walking, and we really want her to do that, right? And any problems there can also be treated by a pediatric physical therapist, and you know, they can start to see problems in the postural system that might not have developed correctly, and they can help correct that. And again, that's going to directly affect all of the functions of her pelvic floor muscles later in life, and her continence, and her reproductive function, her core control, her postural control, and all sorts of other things. After toddling, I'm one step ahead of myself, then she's going to have potty training. So hopefully, if we're lucky. So potty training is a really, really, really important time to be training girls and boys on proper toileting posture, on proper toileting practices, on proper ways to care for their bowel and their bladder health, and also how to use their postural muscles, their core muscles, including their pelvic floor muscles, to help them learn how to maintain proper bowel and bladder health, but also how not to use those muscles. So it's a really, really nice time for us to teach them the right stuff. After potty training comes school. So kids start entering school, and we start entering the debate of kids in school and whether they sit too much, whether they're playing enough, whether there's enough free play, whether there's enough creative play. And kids also are starting to experiment with sports. So we start to see a lot more muscles and things develop into early childhood and school age kids, based on the patterns that they start to see. And this again has a direct effect on the development of their motor patterns, their muscle coordination, and also their pelvic floor muscles. So again, really important in kids that we're paving the way from childhood on. And by the way, anything could go wrong in this process. So kids that have health dysfunction, so dysfunctional health problems such as cystic fibrosis, asthma, any type of cerebral palsy, I could go on and on and on, Down syndrome, spinal cord injuries, brain injuries, all of those things are going to affect the development of these muscles as well, and the child's ability to use these muscles, including their pelvic floor muscles. And it's really, really important to make sure that they optimize their function by getting them to the right pediatric physical therapist, and preferably a pediatric physical therapist who has some knowledge of the pelvic floor muscles and core development, so that they can help them maintain good postural function into adolescence and adulthood. So a little side note there. So back to school age kids, assuming we're talking about normal kids, I definitely wanted to include a little blurb about the kids who aren't necessarily developing on their right milestones, because it's important to talk about them as well. But on the note of school age normal developing kids, they're also starting sports, as I mentioned. So some kids are really, really diverse, and they do a lot of sports, which is really great for the topic I already mentioned called physical literacy, which is basically having a diversity of skills that help make them well-rounded and help prevent injury, help basically give them a very wide variety of motor skills and coordination and function moving into adolescence and adulthood. We know that basically being more diverse in physical skills and sports skills has much better long-term outcomes for kids, teens, and adults than kids who tend to do one or no activities, or have lower what we call physical literacy. That's very well researched, and it's actually being very much more talked about in the sports medicine world now, and something that we're really starting to pay attention to, especially in the topic of early sports specialization. So another big topic we're talking about in the sports medicine world is kids who are starting to specialize in sports really early. So picking one sport and specializing before age 13 and dedicating pretty much their whole life to that sport, training for that sport, traveling for that sport, competing in that sport. So that's basically early sports specialization. Basically what we recommend is kids don't specialize until about 12 or 13 in any sport. But unfortunately, the way it works in our society is kids are sometimes, they have to. That's their only choice. If they want to participate in sports at all in their community, they've got to be specialized in order to make the team, in order to be included. So I'm not going to hate on sports specialization, but we do know that it can lead to problems with physical literacy, injuries, and basically injuries due to repetitive patterning. Or overuse. And we see kids now, I see them in my practice every day with overuse injuries at age 8, age 9, because they started to specialize really early. And the confounding factor is they're specializing while their bodies are changing and while they're going through growth spurts. During growth spurts, the bones grow and the muscles literally can't keep up with how fast the bones grow. And the brain can't reprogram the muscles and tell the muscles what to do in order to keep the muscles from getting overused, exhausted, and worn out. So we run into problems with basically the function of muscles and the developmental function of muscles in kids who are specializing earlier. They're super active or overactive and things like that. We also run into the problems with kids who aren't active enough and they're sitting around on the couch eating bonbons all the time. And we run into problems with physical literacy injuries with both groups. So it's just as important. Super important though in the kids because it really affects the development of their pelvis. So what's most important perhaps in the development of the pelvic floor beyond childhood, when they're learning posture and they're learning toileting and all those types of things, is right around puberty. So in a girl, usually a girl's pelvis starts to widen just before she reaches menarche, which is the start of her period. And sorry, I'm still trying to move from the shadows. And basically, with the widening of those bones, just as when the bones grow long or the limbs grow long, the muscles can't quite keep up if it's going really fast. And sometimes we start to see pelvic floor dysfunction, which can manifest as constipation if she hasn't already had constipation. She could have urinary leakage. She could have tailbone pain when she sits in school. She could have pelvic floor pain. She could have back pain. That's absolutely a dysfunction of not just the pelvic floor muscles, but the core muscles. She could have abdominal pain. She could have difficulty taking a deep breath. And she could just start to look a little bit uncoordinated in her posture. And that, since we talked about before, the development of postural coordination and movement happens from childhood, basically the brain has to recalibrate or calibrate for the first time movement in growing kids. And it's especially pertinent from about age 9 to 13 when a girl is entering puberty and for the very first time ever, her pelvis and her spine start to change their shape big time, which directly affects the function of the core muscles there. So if we haven't talked about pelvic floor health and function, abdominal health and function, spinal health and function, breathing health and function before kids reach puberty, that's about the last time we have a really great opportunity to intervene and steer our girls on the right path to great health function, because it's a lot harder to change functions and change habits once the girl stops growing and once she sort of solidifies her motor patterns and her habits and her coordination. It's even harder if she's specialized in a sport really early and we want to try and redirect her and learn new skills to help prevent injuries in the future, and she hasn't ever mastered those skills in the first place because she really pigeonholed herself into a certain skill set early on in life. So all of that to say, again, the pelvic floor is the most important to look at in kids and teenagers, in my opinion. Lastly, it's not too late though. So if kids reach later teenage years or they're young women, we can absolutely intervene and help again right their ship before they face the next big challenges of femalehood, which might be getting married, or even if they're not married, getting pregnant, having babies, delivering babies, and getting through pregnancy and postpartum life, and then later moving on into menopause. So paving the way from childhood and adolescence is so important. it's why I'm in pediatrics. It's not just for girls, it's not just for athletes, it's for every kid, optimizing their function into adulthood and really making sure that we can, again, right their ships and make sure that they're having the best opportunities as kids. So that gets me into the book, Below Your Belt. So Below Your Belt is such an amazing book. As I mentioned, it basically has several chapters that are so kid friendly. First, it gives you a nice tour of the pelvic region. That's what it's called. It's a tour. We're taking a tour of these muscles, of these things, of all the organs that are in here. They talk about everything you could ever want to talk about in the pelvic floor, and they really normalize it. So there's this stigma in talking about the pelvic floor. There's this stigma in talking about periods and peeing and pooping in kids. I mean, what kid doesn't snicker when you talk about pooping or farting? Like, I mean, even I do sometimes still. But I also pretend like I'm a kid most of the time. So it really normalizes it. It makes it really easy for kids to talk about and feel like they can talk to someone about it as well. It really gives them the resources to do that. They go into a whole chapter on bladder health and teaching boys and girls, but especially girls. It is called How to Be the Queen of Your Pelvic Region After All. But, you know, maybe they'll make a boys one next. Talk about bladder health and having control over your bladder and the connections between the brain and the bladder. We know in research that the brain and the bladder are very much connected, and you can actually retrain your bladder, especially if you have what we call overactive bladder or urinary frequency or urgency. You can actually retrain that function through the nerves that connect the brain and the bladder. It's super cool. So start to teach girls about that from a young age is super important. Talks about what we call just in case peeing or JIC peeing, not doing that. So it's really important actually. If you didn't know this, all you ladies out there and men paying attention, you should never pee just in case. You know, we all do that. Oh, my husband and I were going to a show on Friday and oh, I should probably pee just in case. So I don't have to get up in the middle of the show. I totally did it myself. But the problem is that we start to train our bladders to pee more frequently than it actually needs to. And it lowers it raises the sensitivity of the bladder so that the bladder thinks, or the brain actually thinks that the bladder needs to empty when it's not even full yet. So that's the last thing you really want, is to actually induce yourself to need to urinate more often. So that's something that we can start to teach girls from a young age and something that they talk about in the book. They also talk a lot about bowel health. We can't talk about bladder health without talking about bowel health, because actually bowel health has a huge impact literally on bladder health. The number one cause of bladder leakage, not just in anyone but in kids, is constipation. In fact, 30 to 50% of kids are constipated and they have secondary urinary leakage. So they're peeing on themselves and they're constipated. And that's something that we can prevent. We can prevent that by teaching them about their cores, about how those muscles work together with the pelvic floor, not just the pelvic floor muscles themselves. We can teach them about how to recognize constipation, and they actually give some great information about how to recognize that in the book. So young kids and even older kids in school age, teenagers, they're not even aware of what their pelvic floors are. And part of that's because we don't talk about it. Part of it's because the last time anyone paid attention to their pelvic floors was when they were being transitioned from diapers to toilet training. And, you know, after that, no one's talking about it with them. So they have no clue, you know, no memory of what it felt like to need to use the bathroom or have fullness in their rectum. They just know when they need to go and they don't think twice about it. Another thing that really they go into detail in the book is about proper toileting posture. So if any of you guys have seen any of the videos on social media about the Squatty Potty and other brand toilet stools, they're great. So they're not totally this thing that we need to laugh about. They are funny and they make them funny so that you'll pay attention to them. But they're so important, in getting kids to learn how proper toileting posture from a young age is super important. And by the way, I keep saying we need to teach kids this from a young age, which we do, but my guess is the majority of you who are watching are kind of going, oh, I don't know if I taught my kid that. I don't even know if I taught myself that, or if anyone ever taught me that. So it's okay. The bottom line is never too late to learn these things about proper toileting habits, pelvic health, or anything like that. The ideal is, yes, we want girls to learn it from a young age, but even us as women, as moms, anyone who's invested in ourselves and our self-care, anyone who's invested in girls, we can learn it, we can help our girls learn it, and we can absolutely help all of ourselves and all of our pelvic health moving forward. The book also goes into talking about the pelvic pyramid. So I mentioned that earlier. It's the core four muscles, as I like to call it, the diaphragm, the pelvic floor muscles, the abdominals, and the multifidus, the spinal stabilizer muscles. There's lots of other muscles that go into the core and that interact to allow someone to be a dynamic human mover. But if we look at the deepest layer of muscles that maybe have the biggest role in allowing for proper postures and allowing for proper movement during sports in female athletes, these four have a really, really important function, not only for continence and all the things that we already talked about in bowel and bladder and abdominal health, but also for keeping someone moving at the optimum level for sports. So with each muscle, it's really important for a girl and for a boy and anyone who's using them to learn how not only to contract the muscles and be aware of the muscles, but also to release the muscles and relax them. I think one thing that our culture teaches us is how to contract muscles, but we don't necessarily teach people how to let those muscles go, and that's especially important for the pelvic floor muscles. For example, during toileting, the muscles are supposed to relax. That's why those toileting stools are so great, because they put you in the right position to allow the muscles to relax so that we can eliminate urine or feces. So, as with bowel and bladder function, the pelvic floor muscles also need to relax anytime we are doing sports. So there's a time and a place for the pelvic floor muscles to contract, but also a time and place for the pelvic floor muscles to know how to relax as well. That also goes for the other core muscles, the diaphragm. So when the diaphragm relaxes, that happens when we exhale. So if the diaphragm's contracting all the time, it means you're holding your breath, or that you're bearing down, or you're doing something causing it to contract, and that could actually be really detrimental and lead to lots of injuries. It could also lead to pelvic floor dysfunction because the diaphragm and the pelvic floor, along with the abdominal muscles and the spine muscles, they work together. So it's really important, I gave those two examples, to learn how to get the muscles to relax. It's really important to learn how to get the abdominal muscles to relax. Our culture likes us to believe we need to have a flat tummy all the time, that we need to hold our abs in. And there's a time and a place for us to hold our abs in. However, the abs need to relax in order to bend backwards, maybe to do a back bend in sports, or maybe to dive backwards. The abs need to expand and get longer for those activities. The abs need to be able to contract to allow you to do a tuck or a forward roll or a flip turn in the pool. But they don't need to contract all the time. Imagine if you walked around holding your biceps like this all the time. You're contracting them to their maximal amount. You're squeezing, squeezing, squeezing. But I can't really hold stuff here. I can't use my arms if I'm holding them all here. So just like all of our muscles in the core, we need to learn how to contract them and relax them. And the book does a really nice job explaining the function of the muscles, but also teaching girls some really basic fitness exercises they can do to raise their awareness to these muscles and their ability to both contract and relax the muscles, but also to become aware of those muscles while they're doing sports. The book goes into much more detail as well about other pelvic health factors in girls, including menstruation, the beginning of their periods, and being able to look at their cycles a little bit more holistically. I'm not going to talk as much detail about what the book talks about with menstruation and female hormone health, because I'm saving that for a big webinar that I'm doing 2 weeks from now, and I'll tell you about that in just a second, so stay tuned. But I do want to tell you that the book includes a lot of information about menstrual health and ovulatory health and the future of women's health for a girl, which includes, staying on top of her periods, making sure her periods are normal, how she might eventually prepare her body for something in adulthood, such as pregnancy or menopause, and pelvic hygiene. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. I cannot tell you enough how important this book is for girls. I have all of my female athlete patients read it, and I recommend that they get it for their girls if they're adults. And if my patients are girls, which I have a lot of patients who are girls, teenagers, tweens, pre-adolescents, this is a great book. I make it their home exercise program for physical therapy. And it's a great segue for us to talk about things. It's a great way to build a bridge between a girl and her mom if they don't talk about things very frequently, or just if mom's not quite sure how to bring all this stuff up. If you're that person who's sitting here going, oh God, I need to talk about these things with my daughter, but I'm not really sure how to do it, get the book and use it as a nice, you have your own book club at home and read about these things and figure out a way to talk about it. If you want to know more, especially from the research and science side and the healthcare side and the physical therapy side and the really integrative look at pelvic health, this looks at pelvic health. I look at pelvic health in my book, The Young Female Athlete's Playbook, specific for young female athletes. So it's really applied to sports and athletes because that's my passion. That's the group I love to work with. So my Young Female Athletes Playbook is on sale. It is an ebook, just so you know. This is the only print copy that exists in the world. It's the only one. Look at it, savor it. It's the only one because it's the one that I used to make edits. So I wrote in it when I was editing the book before I first published it. So the Young Female Athletes Playbook is on sale right now. And if you buy it, you actually are getting a freebie this month through the end of the month. You'll get a free copy of the Kids Are Not Small Adults ebook as well. And that book goes into a lot of great detail on youth, sports injuries, growth plate injuries, and all the types of orthopedic and sports conditions that a child athlete and a teen athlete might encounter throughout their career as an athlete. It's a really nice educational tool. It has lots of really nice charts that are a quick reference for parents and for coaches and for teenagers themselves. So make sure you check out the Young Female Athletes Playbook ebook on my website. It's buildstronggirls.com/shop. That's how you can get directly to the store where you could buy the Young Female Athletes Playbook. The way you need to buy it actually in order to get the deal is to add the young athlete, the youth athlete ebook bundle to your chart. And then you'll enter the coupon code BOGOBUNDLE. BOGOBUNDLE at the cart, and within the bundle, when you go to checkout, it'll automatically deduct the cost of the Kids Are Not Small Adults ebook. So basically, you're buying this Young Female Athletes ebook and getting the Kids Are Not Small Adults ebook for free. It's a great book. People have been gifting this to their friends. If you want to figure out how to send it as a gift, since it is an ebook, make sure to reach out to me and I can walk you through the steps on how to do that. Obviously a great gift for Mother's Day as well, which is coming up. So a lot of mothers have really reached out to me and told me how helpful this book has been for their daughters' teammates. And so consider giving it as a Mother's Day gift as well, especially while you get a really nice freebie along with it. Oh, speaking of freebies, I'm going to be doing a free webinar on Tuesday, April 25th, and it's a TED-style talk and basically an encore presentation of the TED-style talk that I did at the Physical Therapy Association of Georgia Spring Meeting in Savannah, which was last March, or this past March actually. And I got a lot of great feedback on that talk, and a lot of people have really been wanting to hear it again. So I thought that I would make it a free webinar, make it accessible to everyone, as long as you sign up for the webinar, and offer some more insight and go into a little bit more detail than I was able to do in my 20-minute TED Talk. So we've scheduled an hour. I don't think that the talk is going to take that long. And I'm going to include some extras, dive into some more detail on some of the topics. And that week specifically in Female Athlete Month here at PRISM is the week that I'm dedicating to two very near and dear topics to me, which are the female athlete triad and relative energy deficiency in sport. My all-star research team from the Emory Doctor of Physical Therapy program is finishing up their research project that we've been working on for the last year on relative energy deficiency in sport in young female and male athletes, and they've done a really great job, and we've really come up with some really interesting information about how to screen for this condition, which is a sort of evolved version of the female athlete triad, looking at menstrual health, bone health, overall sports performance, nutrition, and whether athletes are getting the right amount of energy in to allow not only for sports participation, but also participation in life and overall health, and looking at the long-term deficits of this problem that can lead to lots of problems in lots of different body systems in females in the future. So I'm going to really spend some time diving into that and teaching you guys how to look out for these types of conditions, ask girls about them, and hopefully optimize their health, not just in pelvic health and menstrual health, but in their entire integrative health picture moving forward in life. So make sure you tune into the free webinar. You need to register online. The link is going to be at the bottom of this video on my YouTube page and on my Facebook pages, and I'll definitely be posting all over social media and sending out emails to my mailing list so you guys can get some updates on registration. Do make sure you register though, because space is limited in the webinar. And if you can't make it, don't be deterred from registering. If you can't make it on Tuesday, April 25th at 12 p.m., you can sign up. And as long as you're signed up before the webinar starts, you will get an email later with a link to the replay of the webinar, in addition to all the freebies and the bonuses that I'm going to be offering for people who attend. So make sure you sign up and then pay attention to your email afterward for the freebies and the bonuses that will come. You really don't want to miss this one. I'm really, really excited about it. I put a lot of heart and energy into this project, and I'm so excited about Female Athlete Month. And stay tuned, because every month at PRISM is going to have a different theme along with it, and a different book club that goes along with it. So I look forward to letting you know what May's book club is going to be. So stay posted. I'm going to keep you on the edge of your seat for that. And thank you so much for tuning into book club this month. I look forward to seeing you guys at book club and at the webinar at the end of the month. And thanks again. Have a great April. Bye.